Munro and the Richard Munro Show. This will be an introduction to our second section. And I was thinking that every day I read. I try to read the Wall Street Journal every day. I read Consumer Reports. And I also read books too. And I don't think there's any doubt that people should read a variety of things. Some things you should read to inform yourself, that's very important, and others you can read to entertain yourself. And for example, I enjoy reading Reader's Digest. I don't think Reader's Digest is as serious as Commentary magazine, but I enjoy it, and I find it very light reading. I enjoy the adventures, the stories of people who are being saved, and the joke pages and so it's good light reading. And actually I read Reader's Digest in English and in Spanish, Selecciones to Reader's Digest, so I read it every month. And so you can see Gilbert Highет, and I'm the president of the Gilbert Highет Society on Facebook. And Gilbert Highet was a teacher and educator, and he said some wonderful things about encouraging people to read and reading. And what's some of the good advice he gave on authors? Number one, he said, you find an author that you like, and read as many things as you can from that author to appreciate their wholeness, their uniqueness, and you can worry about details later. So, and I followed his advice. For example, I've read many books by Hayek. I enjoyed it very much. I've read the complete works of Conrad and Hemingway, for example. I've read almost the complete works of Orwell and Twain and Cervantes. Not quite all of Chesterton or Dickens or Shakespeare, but a lot of it. And of course, Hayek himself, his essays, I consider on par with Orwell or Chesterton. Now, Hayek recommended that his listeners and readers seek suggestions for summer reading, because obviously there are times when we have more time to read and less time to read. And he said, if you choose an important author that you like, then try to read more books by that. For Louis L'Amour, for example, may not be the greatest writer in the history of the world, or Arthur Conan Doyle, but they're very accessible and very available and very entertaining. And I've read many books by Louis L'Amour and Conan Doyle, and all of them were worthwhile. And of course, Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories are especially wonderful. And if you are reading beyond the news of the day, it really helps you escape from yourself. So that's very important. What's another thing that Hayek suggested that people do? He said, read about one single important and interesting subject. For example, paintings of cavemen, the agony of modern music, or the rebirth of calligraphy, or recent theories of the duration or duration of the universe. For example, lately I've been reading a lot on nuclear energy and nuclear energy plants, because I can't believe it that we've got to the point where we've fallen so far behind China, and people basically have irrational fears about nuclear energy, when it seems that we have to be brave, and we have to have, it seems to be the best way to have a lot of clean energy in the future, and it can be done safely. So we have to get away. And so I'm studying about it and reading all that I can. And of course, Hyatt also suggests that we could read a large selection of poems and prose passages to illuminate one single aspect of the world. One volume would go into the pocket or handbag and last all summer. For example, you can have Diane Ravitch has The American Reader, The English Reader. These are wonderful anthologies that go through straight through. But it is true, when I read Hyatt, and most of his articles are written 50, 60, 70 years ago, and you realize how much closer he is to Victorian Scotland than the 21st century America. Because he said, one might decide to spend the summer with a single great, or at least one single interesting man. For example, every doctor should know the life of William Osler by Henry Cushing. And after reading that fine book, he would enjoy himself if he wanted to read Osler's own writings. Osler never tired of complaining that most doctors had minds too limited and too confined to physical symptoms which they observed in the routine of their practice. He was trying to enlarge his own mind and spirit, and his books were therefore enlarge the mind and spirit of his readers, whether they are in the medical profession or not. But there's no question that Hyatt seemed to live in a happier, more sane world, which scholars and teachers could safely assume that some of their students, neighbors, and readers would seek pleasure and self-improvement in the books that they read, and they would find it. So, of course, and it's something to think about. My father used to say that don't trust books written before 1965. There's certain dates that after a certain time can be contaminated, as it were. And this is why C.S. Lewis said, read 2 old books for every new book you read, because you have to keep that in mind. If you only read contemporary books and woke books, you will not realize the ideas and the vocabulary and the points of view of others. So that's very, very important. And I have several books by Hyatt. Man's Unconquerable Mind is a wonderful book to read. It's still very accessible. You have to buy used copies. He wrote The Art of Teaching and The Immortal Profession. And these are wonderful books and essays still to read. And just last year was published The Classical Legacy of Gilbert Highett by Robert Ball. And it gives an interesting biography of him. Highett was really James Bond before there was James Bond. What do I mean? He was an agent for MI6 in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. He traveled there with his wife, pretending to be a tourist. His wife was a German major. She was fluent in German. He became fluent in German himself. And so he actually operated for MI6 in Nazi Germany secretly in the 1930s. And then during World War II, he worked also on secret information. We don't know exactly what, but probably interpretation of ultra. He was stationed in New York. He was a colonel in the British Army in intelligence, and probably doing interpretation of ultra intelligence, because I only surmise that because he was fluent in German, and so he could interpret messages coming in and out on there. He did other work for it as well. He worked for William Stevenson, the man called Intrepid, who was an advisor to Churchill himself. And so we know now that he worked for MI6, although the exact details of his career are not known yet at this time. But we'll certainly mention Gilbert Highett and do more with him later. Thank you.